She looked me in the eye and said, "I'm pregnant with your baby, so put your house in my name." But when I demanded a DNA test, the truth shattered her entire plan and left her begging. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the type to share something this personal online, but life can throw some wild surprises your way. I'm 34 and, up until recently, I thought I had my relationship game down. I've been dating this woman, let's call her Ava, for about a year. At first, she seemed like someone I could envision a future with. She had charm and warmth, plus this sense of stability that I found really appealing. We clicked quickly, and for a good while, things felt effortless. We traveled together, spent weekends just wrapped up in each other's company, and talked about a future most couples just dream about. Yeah, every relationship has its bumps. We had our share of arguments over small stuff and some bigger issues. I figured that was all part of it. You work through it, compromise, and move on. I thought we were solid. Then one morning, everything changed. I remember it clearly. It was early, and Ava wanted to talk. She asked me to sit down, and her demeanor was serious. Not nervous or excited, just flat, almost businesslike. She looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm pregnant. You're the father, and you need to step up for me and our baby." Just like that. No build-up, no excitement in her voice. It felt more like she was handing me a bill than sharing life-changing news. I sat there trying to wrap my head around it. I was open to having kids someday, but only in the right relationship and at the right time. But the way she said it raised all sorts of alarms for me. Felt less like joy and more like pressure. Then it hit me, her claim didn't add up. We hadn't even been intimate for over 10 days before her announcement. Work had been chaotic, and we had both been emotionally distant lately. That wasn't just me imagining things. It was a fact. The timeline was off. I sat there, staring at her, my brain racing. Part of me wanted to believe her, thinking maybe she just mixed up the dates, or maybe stress clouded her memory. But the louder part of me knew something was off. Still, I just listened, trying to piece everything together. When we were last together, the timeline, her odd tone. The whole situation felt really wrong, and I couldn't shake that feeling. What unnerved me even more was how she acted after delivering the news. No tears, no nervous laughter. None of the things I thought would follow that kind of revelation. Instead, it was straight to the point. "You're the dad. You need to step up." Felt more like a demand than anything else. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I knew this wasn't going to be a standard conversation about starting a family. It felt like the start of something much darker. Finally, I spoke up, trying to keep my voice steady. I said, "Ava, I don't know what you're trying to say, but there's no way this child is mine. We haven't been together like that in over 10 days. The timing doesn't add up." For a split second, I saw surprise flicker across her face, but it quickly turned to something else. Her eyes hardened, and her tone became sharp. "So, you're just going to abandon me? Abandon your own child?" She snapped. "You think you can just walk away from this? No, this is your baby whether you like it or not." It was like a switch flipped. One minute she was delivering news, and the next she was on the attack. I was stunned. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I was just stating facts, but she twisted it around, painting me as some kind of monster for not immediately accepting responsibility. I tried to reason with her again, saying something along the lines of, "I'm not abandoning anyone. I just don't believe this baby is mine. The timeline doesn't make sense." She wouldn't budge. Her voice got louder as she accused me of making excuses, trying to dodge my responsibilities. Then came the moment that really set off alarm bells in my head. She leaned in closely, looking dead serious, and said, "If you don't acknowledge this baby, I'll make your life hell. I'll file charges against you for neglect and abuse. I'll ruin you in court." I was left speechless. Did she really just threaten legal action because I dared to question her claim? But she wasn't done there. She pushed even further. "If you really care, if you're serious about being with me, then prove it. Put your house in my name. Show me you're committed to me and our child. Otherwise, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are." That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or confusion. This was all calculated. She had thought this through. She wasn't merely trying to guilt me into accepting a child that might not be mine. She was trying to use it for control, security, money. My house was the target. I can't even explain how surreal that felt. It was like watching someone pull off a mask, revealing their true self. The woman I thought I knew, the affectionate partner, she was gone. In her place sat someone willing to lie, manipulate, and blackmail me to get what she wanted. I felt a wave of panic crash over me. My heart was racing, and my mind was spinning. She was threatening my reputation, my entire life. And the worst part? I knew she'd double down if she thought it would work. But then something in me shifted. Instead of panicking, I decided I wouldn't give her the reaction she craved. If she was going to play dirty, I needed to stay calm, think clearly, and figure out a way to protect myself. So, I took a deep breath, looked her in the eye, and said as evenly as I could, "I'm not putting my house in anyone's name. If this baby is mine, we'll find that out the right way through a test. But threatening me isn't going to get you anywhere." She clearly didn't like that response. Her expression darkened, and she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. But in that moment, I knew two things for sure. This wouldn't be the last of her threats, and I had to be smarter than her to make it out of this in one piece. After Ava left, I sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. My mind was racing, but instead of letting panic take the reins, I fell into problem-solving mode. I couldn't let her threats control me. If she was serious about dragging me to court, I had to make sure I wasn't going in unprepared. The next day, I reached out to an old friend who happened to be a lawyer. I didn't dive into all the personal details at first, just laid out the basics. Girlfriend claiming pregnancy, making threats, demanding I put property in her name. He didn't flinch when I told him. He just said, "Document everything. Every text, every call, every conversation. Don't delete anything, no matter how insignificant it seems. If she's making threats, keep a record. And remember, paternity has to be proven. She can't force you to support a child without evidence." That really hit me like a lifeline. She can't force anything without proof. So, I switched up my strategy. I stopped arguing with her. I stopped trying to convince her that the timeline didn't make sense. Instead, I just started listening. Whenever she'd send me texts accusing me of abandoning her or trying to pressure me to sign over my house, I saved them. Whenever she called yelling about my responsibilities, I noted the time and the conversation details. In my state, it's legal to record calls as long as one party consents, so I started doing that too. Here's the kicker. The calmer I remained, the bolder she became. It was like she thought my silence meant I was cornered. One night, she sent me a message saying, "I don't care how. I'll make sure the baby is legally yours. You can't run from this." When I read that, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was proof. Proof that she wasn't focused on what was real, but on making her narrative fit whatever outcome she desired. At that point, I stopped feeling scared and started feeling ready. A couple of weeks later, she showed up at my place with a folder. Papers she claimed were for the baby's future. She pushed them across the table and said I needed to sign to show my commitment. I didn't even touch the papers. I looked her in the eye and calmly said, "If this baby is mine, then I'll be there. But first, we start with a DNA test." That's when everything shifted. Her confidence faltered. The color drained from her face. She tried to laugh it off, saying things like, "Why would you even need that? Don't you trust me?" But I stood my ground. "It's the only way forward," I told her. She got angry, called me heartless, and accused me of humiliating her before storming out again. But I could see it in her eyes, fear. She knew her plan was slipping. From that point on, I stopped being afraid of her threats. I understood that no matter how loud she got, the truth would eventually come out, and I was ready to face it head-on. After that last confrontation about the DNA test, things between Ava and me became tense but quiet. For a week, I didn't hear much from her, just a few angry texts here and there about how cold I was being. Then she showed up at my door again, furious from the moment I opened it. She accused me of disrespecting her, not believing her, treating her like a liar. I didn't raise my voice, I just reiterated what I'd said before. I'm willing to step up if this baby is mine, but we're starting with a DNA test. That's the only way this conversation continues. That set her off. She screamed that I was heartless and already failing as a father before the baby was even born. Then she hit me with the big card legal threats. If you don't take responsibility now, I'll go to court. I'll file charges for neglect and abuse. You'll regret treating me this way. But I wasn't shaken this time. While she ranted, all I could think about were the texts and recordings I'd saved. My lawyer's words echoed in my head. Document everything. And I had. So instead of panicking, I looked her in the eyes and replied calmly, if you want to take this to court, go ahead. A DNA test will settle this once and for all. And when it shows the truth, I'll present all your threats, too. Her mouth opened as if she wanted to retaliate, but nothing came out. For the first time, she seemed uncertain, like she realized she was on thin ice. She muttered something about me being cold and stormed out again. That was the last time we faced each other. A week turned into another, and I half expected to see court papers in my mailbox. But instead, there was only silence. 2 months later, I ran into a mutual friend who hadn't spoken to me much since Ava and I split. When her name came up, he gave me this look and said, "Man, you're lucky you didn't get caught up in that mess." I asked for details, and that's when the truth finally surfaced. The baby wasn't mine. It never had been. The father was some other guy she'd been seeing behind my back for months. Everyone in their closer circle knew by then. She came after me because I was the stable one. I had a good life, a home, and a future she could cling to. The real dad? A guy with no money and no interest in being responsible. Everything clicked. Every threat, every push to sign over my house, every guilt trip. She wasn't scared about raising a child. She was scared of facing the consequences of her own choices. So, she tried to pin it on me. Hearing it confirmed what I'd suspected deep down, but it still hit hard. Not in a way that broke me, but in a way that made me realize how close I had come to losing everything. I hadn't sidestepped just one problem. I had avoided a total disaster. After finding out the truth from my friend, I thought I'd feel angry, and I did. But more than anything, I felt this strange cocktail of relief and disbelief. Relief that I wasn't trapped in her mess, and disbelief at just how far she was willing to go to drag me down with her. But here's the thing. Lies have a way of catching up with you, especially when you tell too many. And Ava? She had been spinning a web of deception not just with me but with everyone around us. At first, she tried to keep her story consistent, telling people I was the dad, that I had abandoned her in her time of need. She painted herself as the victim, a woman left behind by a man refusing to take responsibility. Some people believed her at first, and that hurt. I felt the cold stares from acquaintances, people we both knew, as if I had really done something unforgivable. But then cracks started to form. Someone who knew the real dad began to talk. Rumors spread that Ava had been seen with him long after she and I were supposedly exclusive. A few people recalled nights when she suddenly disappeared or flaked on me, only to be spotted out with him. One by one, her narrative began to crumble. Meanwhile, I didn't feel the need to defend myself loudly. I knew the truth and had the evidence. If anyone asked me directly, I just said, "Ask her for a DNA test. That'll clear everything up." And that was it. Simple, calm, and firm. That's when the tide started to turn. People who'd initially judged me began to question her. Why wouldn't she agree to a DNA test if she was so sure? Why was she so fixated on getting me to sign over my house instead of focusing on the baby? The more questions surfaced, the angrier and more defensive she got. Instead of garnering sympathy, she started losing it. The more she lashed out, the more it became clear that something wasn't adding up. Then came the turning point. Apparently, she confronted the real dad one night at a bar. It got heated, and people overheard her shouting something like, "You think you can just run from this while I'm stuck figuring it out?" News spread like wildfire, and within days, almost everyone in our circle knew the truth. The baby wasn't mine. It was his. And the only reason she dragged me into it was that she thought I was the better option. When I heard that, I didn't feel anger. I felt vindicated. All the time I spent staying calm, documenting everything, refusing to play her game. It all paid off. But the fallout for her was brutal. People stopped taking her seriously. The sympathy she tried to cultivate crumbled. Even those who wanted to support her couldn't ignore the contradictions any longer. And from what I gathered, the real dad wasn't stepping up either. She was in the very situation she had tried to escape by trying to pin it on me. I didn't celebrate or gloat. I didn't need to. Her world was collapsing on its own. By the time Ava's lies unraveled, she was running out of places to hide. People who had once defended her began to keep their distance, and the perfect story she had tried to weave fell apart. The silence stretched on for weeks, and honestly, I thought that was it. But just when I started to move on, she reached out again. Late one evening, my phone lit up with her name. I considered ignoring it, but I felt this urge for closure. I answered, and her voice was unlike anything I'd heard before. Gone was the confidence, the demands, and the threats. She sounded small, almost broken. I know you hate me, but I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. I thought you'd take care of me, but he won't. I don't have anyone else. For the first time, she seemed to be admitting the truth. No games, no accusations, just desperation. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy, I won't lie. Hearing her like that, knowing the situation she was in, I almost caught a glimpse of the woman I thought I was with a year ago. But then I remembered every threat, every attempt to trap me, and every demand to hand over my house. That wasn't fear. That was manipulation. I told her as calmly as I could, Ava, you didn't just make a mistake. You lied. You tried to trap me. You threatened to ruin me. I can't just pretend that didn't happen. She started crying, saying she regretted it, that she wasn't thinking straight, that she just needed stability. I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words linger. Then I asked the one question that had haunted me for months. If the DNA test proved the baby wasn't mine, would you have admitted the truth, or would you have kept pushing until I broke? There was a pause, followed by a faint, I don't know. And that was it. That answer told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't reaching out of genuine regret. She was reaching out because her plan had crumbled, and she was out of options. I told her I couldn't be what she wanted, that I hoped she could figure things out on her own, but I wouldn't get dragged back into it. She didn't react well. She begged, promised to change, and even said, we can forget everything if you just give me one more chance. But the truth was, there was no way to forget. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I hung up, and that was the last real conversation we had. Over the next few weeks, she tried reaching out, sending texts and calls, and even showing up at my place once. I never answered. I didn't yell or argue. I just cut her off completely. Eventually, she stopped. And just like that, the storm she had brought into my life finally passed. But as the dust settled, I realized this wasn't just a dramatic chapter to laugh about later. It was a lesson about trust, manipulation, and how quickly someone you think you know can become a stranger. When Ava finally stopped reaching out, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. It was quiet again. No more late-night threats, no more manipulative texts, and no more wondering what game she'd play next. But even with the calm, I knew I couldn't just leave it all as is. She had already tried once to take what wasn't hers, my house. What was stopping her from trying again? So I called my lawyer. We sat down and went through every detail, and he offered me advice that ended up being the smartest move I could make. He recommended restructuring the deed to my house under a family trust. That way, it wouldn't just be my house. It would legally belong to the trust, making it nearly impossible for anyone to touch, even if they tried something drastic in court. This wasn't just about protecting my property. It was about sending a message to myself. I wasn't going to let anyone put me in that position again. As for Ava, word traveled fast. People who once bought into her story now knew the truth. Some cut ties with her completely, while others felt pity, but even that was tinged with disappointment. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the one who tried to manufacture a tragedy and got caught in her own lies. And the real father? From what I gathered, he wasn't stepping up at all. Financially, emotionally, or in any way. Exactly the type of guy Ava was trying to avoid being tied to in the first place. She ended up facing the very future she had tried to escape, but now with a tarnished reputation and fewer people willing to stand by her. Do I feel sorry for her? Sometimes, yeah. I don't think anyone wins when a child is brought into the world under these circumstances. But sympathy only goes so far. She made choices, calculated ones, that could have destroyed me if I hadn't kept my cool and thought smart. She chose lies over honesty, threats over trust, and manipulation over love. Looking back, I can honestly say I didn't just dodge a bullet. I sidestepped a firing squad. Because think about it, if I had given in to her pressure, signed over my house, and accepted the baby without proof, I would have been tied to her for life. Financially, emotionally, legally. My future would have been shackled to someone who saw me as nothing more than an escape plan. Instead, I walked away with my sanity, freedom, and life intact. I haven't spoken to Ava since. I don't need to. The silence says more than any conversation ever could. She knows I saw through her. She knows she lost. And deep down, I think she regrets it. Not just losing me, but losing the chance at a life she thought she could secure through deception. Now, whenever I think back on this whole ordeal, I remind myself of one simple truth. Love without trust isn't love at all. And if someone tries to corner you with fear instead of building with you through honesty, they don't deserve a place in your life. So that's my story. She tried to trap me with a child that wasn't mine, attempted to take my house, and wanted to ruin me when I wouldn't go along with her scheme. In the end, she ruined her own reputation instead. I walked away free. But I'll admit, I sometimes wonder how different my life would be right now if I hadn't stood my ground. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more content.